When my son looked me in the eye and told me I was not welcome in his home for Christmas, I did not argue. I simply smiled, walked out to my car, and made a single phone call. By the time the new year rolled around, their mortgage payments had been cut off, and that was only the first move in a much larger plan. Pride had gone too far, and I intended to bring balance back. What I chose to do afterward is something most people would never expect. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I could make my turkey this year, I said, easing myself deeper into Daniel's leather sofa. The one with the sage stuffing your mother adored. Remember how she used to tease that it was even better than her grandmother's recipe? My words lingered in the air, blending with the heavy sweetness of Claudia's overpriced vanilla candles. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside me. The light from the 11-foot Christmas tree reflected off his wedding band, and I noticed the way his shoulders tightened like he was bracing for a punch. Dad, I need to tell you something. You will not be welcome here for Christmas this year. The sentence hit me in the chest like a physical strike. I blinked, convinced I had misheard. What do you mean by that? Why would I not be welcome in my own son's home? Daniel kept his eyes fixed on the marble coffee table, the same one I had helped him pick out last spring, when Claudia declared that their old furniture was not refined enough. Claudia's parents are coming, he muttered. They would rather you were not here. My hands went cold. They would rather? That is their decision? Not yours? It is just easier this way, Dad, he said, his voice shrinking with every word. You know how her family is about their traditions. They like things done their way. I looked around the room, my eyes taking in every detail. The silk curtains I had paid for when Claudia complained about privacy. The hardwood floors I had bought with money from a second mortgage, the crown molding that maxed out my credit card. Every corner of this house was tied to me, my work, my sacrifices, my love for my son. Their way, I repeated slowly. And what way is that exactly, Daniel? He flinched, like the question itself stung. Dad, please, do not make this any harder than it already is. Through the kitchen archway, I spotted Claudia's latest toy, a brand new Bosch mixer, professional grade, that she just had to have for her holiday baking obsession. $2,200 of my money sitting there untouched after maybe 2 uses since October. And where am I supposed to spend Christmas then? My voice came out softer than I intended, almost broken. Daniel's face twisted with guilt. Maybe you could visit Aunt Teresa, or we could celebrate the weekend after? The weekend after, as if Christmas was nothing but another appointment that could be pushed to a more convenient time. I stood up slowly, my knees aching after years of carrying these burdens. I see. Dad, wait. Daniel started, but I was already walking toward the door. I passed the family photos on the wall, each frame showing me fading further and further into the background. I passed the closet stuffed with Claudia's $1,000 coats. My hand closed around the cold metal of the doorknob. Without turning back, I said, Son, tell Claudia's parents, Feliz Navidad. The December air slapped my face as I stepped outside. Behind me, Daniel called my name once, then the door shut with a soft, final click. I sat in my truck for a moment, near the engine off, staring at the glowing Christmas lights in windows I would never again be invited behind. My phone buzzed. It was probably Daniel trying to patch things up with hollow promises. I ignored it. Instead, I turned the key, the engine rumbling to life, and pulled away from the house I had paid for, but was never truly allowed to belong in. The heater rattled against the winter cold as I drove through the familiar streets. Riverbend spread out around me, every block carrying memories of the man I used to be, the man who believed family came first, who would give his last dollar just to see his son happy. That man was gone. He had been a fool. At the red light on 14th and Maple, I watched a young father load Christmas presents into the back of his SUV. His children pressed their little faces against the windows, fogging the glass with excitement. Once upon a time, that had been Daniel and me, before Claudia. Before I became nothing but a bank account with feelings nobody cared about. Numbers started flashing in my head like a busted slot machine. $3,000 every month, for 5 years straight. Even my calculator had given up when I added it all last spring. The total had stopped me cold, $180,000. more than Sophia and I had ever managed to save for retirement. Gone. Just gone. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator harder than necessary, the truck roaring as if it shared my anger. Maple Avenue. That was where I had refinanced our home, my home, Sophia's home, to cover their down payment. I could still picture the loan officer's expression, pity I had not understood at the time. Mr. Morales, are you certain about this? You are putting an awful lot on the line for someone else's investment. Someone else's investment, not my son's future, not my family's security. That banker had been right. It was never about me. It was all about someone else's investment. Jefferson Avenue. That was the branch where I had taken out a second mortgage when Daniel lost his job 2 years earlier. Just temporary, Dad, he had told me. Just until I get back on my feet. I still remember Claudia standing behind him that day, a $800 purse dangling from her arm, nodding like she cared. In reality, she was already calculating how much my desperation could be squeezed for. Turns out, desperation has no value when it comes to them. I pulled into my own driveway, the one with cracked concrete I never had the money to repair because every spare cent had gone into keeping their perfect little suburban illusion alive. The porch light flickered above me, another repair left waiting. Inside, the house felt like a shell without Sophia's laughter, without the warmth of family gatherings I knew would never return. As I struggled with the keys, my phone rang, its shrill tone bouncing off the hollow walls. Claudia's name glowed on the screen, probably calling to justify why I was not good enough for her parents' refined taste. Perfect. I had been waiting for this conversation for 5 long years. I let it ring 3 times, then answered on the 4th, just to make her wonder if I would pick up at all. Victor. Claudia's voice oozed false sweetness, the same syrupy tone she always used when asking me to cover their property taxes or water bills. I heard about the little misunderstanding with Daniel. Misunderstanding? I said, leaning against my kitchen counter, coat still on. And said, there is no misunderstanding, Claudia. You made yourself very clear. Look, I know it seems harsh, but you need to see it from my parents' perspective. They are very traditional. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays. A certain atmosphere, I repeated. And what kind would that be? Silence. I could hear shopping bags rustling behind her, probably filled with things bought with money that should have gone to their mortgage. My money. Well, they are not used to your style of cooking, all that spicy Mexican food. The music. And Victor, they are educated people. They expect conversations about art, literature, world events. The words landed harder than any slap. 8 years of keeping my mouth shut, of swallowing her little insults for Daniel's sake, of ignoring the way she looked at me like I was the hired help. My kind of cooking, I said evenly. You mean the meals you ate every Sunday for 3 years when times were tight? The tamales you swore reminded you of your grandmother? That was different, she snapped. We appreciated it then, but now with my parents. Now, with your parents, you cannot have a Mexican peasant embarrassing you at your precious dinner table. Her sweetness dropped. Do not be dramatic, Victor. This is not about race. It is about class. My father graduated summa cum laude from Stanford University. My mother speaks 4 languages. They spend summers in the Malibu. What would you add to the conversation? Stories about laying tile? Heat rose in my chest, but I kept my tone steady. I built a business from the ground up after your husband's grandfather passed away. I have given jobs to more than 50 people. I have paid more in taxes than your father earned in his best year. Money is not everything, Victor. Breeding matters. Education matters. And frankly, Sophia knew her place better than you ever have. The line went dead silent. She had stepped across a boundary I had not even realized existed until that moment. What did you just say about my wife? I am only saying she knew how to blend in. She did not cause trouble. She accepted that certain spaces were not meant for her. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles whitened. Sophia had more class in one finger than your entire family tree combined, I said. Oh, please, she was just a house cleaner who got lucky. At least she was smart enough to stay quiet about it. Claudia, I said, my voice dropping into something cold and unfamiliar even to me, listen carefully. This conversation is over. We are done pretending we are family. You cannot just... We are done, I repeated, and hung up. I set the phone down gently on the counter, surprised at how steady my hands were. The kitchen felt different now. Smaller, yes, but lighter, as if the air itself had been cleared. I walked over to my desk in the corner and pulled out the manila folder I had been avoiding for months. Inside were the records, bank statements, mortgage documents, a paper trail of my own mistakes, 5 years of automatic payments that drained me dry while they lived like royalty. It was time to stop the bleeding. Part 4, the first decision, canceling the mortgage. I spread the papers across the table like evidence in a courtroom. Each month told the same story. $2,800 gone from my account on the 15th, funneled straight into theirs. The total was a monument to my own foolishness. First year, $36,000. Second year, another $36,000. By the third year, I had stopped buying new clothes. By the fourth, I was shopping at discount grocery stores. By the fifth, I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to keep afloat. $180,000, and that did not even include the down payment. Or the times I covered their utilities when Claudia's shopping sprees spiraled out of control. Or the roof I paid for. Or the landscaping. Or the furniture they insisted was essential. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the numbers until they blurred into nothing. Sophia's life insurance, my retirement savings, even the college fund we had once set aside for the grandchildren, I now realized I might never meet. Every last bit of it, gone. Poured into a home where I was not even welcome to share a Christmas meal. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts until I found the bank's number, and pressed call. A polite automated system greeted me, offering options in English and Spanish. How considerate, I thought, so welcoming to people like me. Customer service, this is Melissa. How may I assist you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice steadier than it had sounded in years. Certainly, sir. I'll just need your account number and some verification details. I rattled them off from memory, listening to the sound of her typing. Professional, efficient. No judgment in her tone about why a 63-year-old man was canceling what she surely recognized as his son's mortgage payment. I see the transfer, Mr. Morales. $3,000 every month to Bank of America, account ending in 7423. It looks like you've been making these payments for 5 years. The number stung. 5 years, I confirmed. And you'd like to cancel, effective immediately? I glanced around my kitchen, the outdated stove, the peeling paint, the draft slipping through the windows I could never afford to replace because all my money had gone into their dream house. Yes, I said, effective immediately. Done. The transfer has been canceled. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? No. The word came out crisp, clean. It felt better than I expected. No, that's all. I hung up and silence filled the room. Outside, darkness was already creeping across Sacramento, December lights glowing in windows where families gathered without judgment, without conditions. For the first time in 5 years, my budget would finally balance. For the first time since Sophia's death, I could consider fixing the porch light, buying real groceries, maybe even taking a small trip. I gathered the stack of statements and mortgage papers, the physical evidence of how thoroughly I had bled for them. I carried it to the fireplace, struck a match, and fed the flames. Years of sacrifice burned into ash. The heat on my face felt better than anything I'd felt in a long time. My phone buzzed with a text, probably Daniel with a hollow apology, or Claudia demanding money for something essential like throw pillows. I didn't bother to look. Instead, I opened the good whiskey I had been saving for a celebration that never came. Tonight was good enough. I poured a glass, raised it toward Sophia's photo on the mantle, and toward the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. Merry Christmas to me, I said out loud, and for once I meant it. The next morning broke crisp and bright, winter sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows as I nursed my second cup of coffee. For the first time in years, I wasn't running calculations in my head about what was due to disappear from my account in 3 days. That freedom tasted better than the rich Colombian blend I had finally allowed myself to buy. At exactly 10:47, my phone rang. Claudia's name glared on the screen like a hazard sign. Victor! Her voice carried that thin impatience she could never hide. I need you to pick up my parents from San Francisco International Airport. Their flight from Los Angeles lands at 2:30. I set my mug down carefully, watching the steam twist upward. Claudia, did you forget what we talked about yesterday? Whatever that was, she said briskly. Let's move on. We need to deal with practical matters. My parents need a ride, and you're the only one free during the day. The audacity was almost impressive. Less than 24 and a half hours after telling me I wasn't welcome at their Christmas table, she was asking me to chauffeur her family around. And why are you asking me? I said quietly. Because that's what family does, Victor. They help each other. Her tone sharpened. Besides, let's be honest. You're not my rival. You're too weak to be my rival, so just get in your truck and pick them up. There it was, the insult tucked neatly inside a command. What airline? I asked, calm. Delta Airlines, Flight 519. They'll be at baggage claim Carousel 4. And Victor? They're expecting someone who can handle their luggage properly. Do not embarrass us. I could hear her nails tapping against a hard surface, probably the granite countertop I had paid for when she declared laminate was beneath her. Of course, I said evenly. I'll handle everything. Good, and wear something decent. Maybe that blue shirt you wore to Daniel's graduation. They notice details. The line clicked dead. Not even a thank you. I sat back in my chair, staring at the blank screen. 2:30, Flight 519, baggage claim 3. I looked up at the clock above my sink. 11:05. Plenty of time. I poured another cup of coffee, added more sugar than usual, and opened the newspaper to yesterday's crossword. 7 across, delayed gratification. 12 letters. The answer would come to me eventually. At 2:35 that afternoon, I was sitting comfortably in my favorite chair with a fresh cup of Earl Grey and the Sunday edition of the San Francisco Chronicle. The crossword from yesterday rested on the table beside me, already solved. Delayed gratification, the clue had said. The answer had been postponement. My phone buzzed on the wooden surface. Claudia's name lit up the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. The December sunlight poured through my windows, warming the same living room where I had spent countless evenings tallying up what my generosity had cost me. But today that quiet felt different, earned, intentional. At 2:55, the phone lit up again. This time a text preview appeared. Dad, where are you? My parents are. I flipped the phone face down and turned back to the sports page. The Seahawks had lost again. Some things never change. By 3:40, the phone had gone off 6 more times. In that span, I'd read every page of the paper, brewed a second pot of tea, and even cleaned out the junk drawer in my kitchen table. Funny how much you can get done when you are no longer running errands for people who see you as their servant. At 3:55, the phone rang once more, but this time it was an unfamiliar number. Likely her parents borrowing someone else's phone at the airport. I ignored that one too. Through the window, I saw my neighbor untangling Christmas lights, his kids chasing each other in the yard, breath puffing like smoke in the cold air. A normal family, living a normal afternoon. Nobody stranded in an airport wondering why their chauffeur never showed. By 4:15, the buzzing had become relentless. Claudia, then the mystery number, then back to Claudia again. It was like an angry hornet slamming itself against glass. I walked into the kitchen, yanked the landline cord out of the wall, and powered down my cell phone completely. Silence. Beautiful, complete silence. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and opened a can of tomato soup. Simple food I hadn't treated myself to in months because every grocery dollar had been siphoned into keeping their illusion of wealth alive. The bread browned perfectly in the pan, the cheese melted golden, and the soup steamed in my favorite mug. Outside, the sun was already dipping low, painting long winter shadows across the backyard. Somewhere across Sacramento, 3 very entitled people were probably arguing about taxi fare, fuming that their personal driver had left them stranded. The thought made the sandwich taste even better. By 5 o'clock, I had eaten, loaded the dishwasher, and was deciding on a movie. It had been years since I'd had a full evening to myself without the constant fear of an emergency request or a desperate plea for cash. I was just reaching for the remote when the pounding started. Not knocking. Pounding. A furious, heavy hammering that shook the doorframe. I set my tea aside and walked slowly toward the noise, already certain of who would be waiting. The blows grew harder as I reached the door, each one vibrating through the wood. Peering through the peephole, I saw 3 figures crammed onto my porch, Their anger pressed up against my house like a storm. I opened the door. Richard Morgan's face was red and furious, only inches from mine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, barging past me into the living room without an ounce of courtesy. "We waited at that damn airport for over 3 hours." His wife, Eleanor, followed close behind. Her carefully styled hair was a mess, and her lips were pinched into a hard line of disapproval. "This is disgraceful, Victor. Completely disgraceful. Behavior like this from someone your age? Barbaric." Last came Claudia, coat wrinkled, makeup smudged, fury radiating from her like heat off asphalt. "You humiliated us! Do you realize what you've done? My parents had to spend $40 on a taxi because you. Get out of my house." My voice cut clean through their shouting, sharp and final. They froze. Richard blinked. "Excuse me?" His face darkened from red to purple. "You don't get to make demands after the stunt you pulled. Not here." "This is my home," I said quietly, my feet planted by the door. "And I want you out, now." Eleanor stepped forward, her words dripping with the kind of superiority she had perfected over decades of sneering at people like me. "Victor, you clearly don't understand the consequences of what you've done. My husband has connections, business ties, social ties. You cannot treat people of our standing this way and expect—" "This was a lesson," I interrupted, holding her gaze without blinking. "A lesson about your arrogance, about the way you treat people you believe are beneath you." Claudia's jaw dropped. "A lesson? Who do you think you are to lecture us? You're nobody. I am the man who finally stopped being your bank account and your taxi driver." I stepped to the side and pushed the door open wide. "The lesson is over. You can leave now." Richard jabbed a finger toward my chest, but stopped short of actually touching me. "You have no clue who you're dealing with, old man. I've been in this town longer than you've been breathing its air. I have people, important people, the kind who can make your life miserable." "Is that a threat, Mr. Jenkins?" I asked evenly. His eyes narrowed. "No, that's a promise." His voice dropped to a rasp. "You think you can abandon elderly folks at an airport and just walk away? You're about to find out exactly how wrong you are." Eleanor nodded sharply, her smile as cold as glass. "Indeed, choices carry consequences, Victor, and yours will be very public." Claudia tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, forget it. He's pathetic, not worth our time." They filed out like soldiers retreating from a lost battle, but Richard turned at the door, his glare burning through me. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Count on it." I closed the door behind them and threw the deadbolt with a click that felt final, solid. Through the curtain, I watched them pile into their rental, still bickering as they drove off into the winter night. The air in the house felt lighter without them, as though their presence had left a film on everything that was only now lifting away. But their words lingered in the quiet. Public consequences, connections, important people. I returned to the living room, lifted my mug of tea. Still warm. For a moment, I felt a flicker of concern, but it was quickly drowned by something sharper: anticipation. 3 days later, I was at my kitchen table with my morning coffee when my own face stared back at me from page 4 of the San Francisco Chronicle. The headline read, "Sacramento businessman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm." My hands froze around the mug. There I was in grainy black and white, an old photo lifted from my company's website, at least 5 years out of date. Beneath it, an article that made my blood go cold even as my temper started to burn. Richard and Eleanor Morgan, in Sacramento visiting their daughter for Christmas, were stranded at San Francisco International Airport for more than 4.5 hours on Sunday when family member Victor Morales failed to arrive for a prearranged pickup. The couple, both in their late 50s, endured the ordeal as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. A winter storm warning. The temperature that day had been 55 degrees and sunny. "We couldn't believe anyone would abandon us like that," Richard was quoted. "We called him over and over, but Mr. Morales ignored us. In the end, we had no choice but to pay for an expensive taxi in hazardous weather. At our age, being treated this way isn't just inconsiderate, it's dangerous." The piece went on, filled with hints about my so-called erratic behavior and whispers about my mental stability. Richard had framed himself and Eleanor as helpless victims of an unstable old man who snapped without warning. No mention of the Christmas dinner rejection. No hint of Claudia's demands, no word about the years of financial bleeding. Just me, the villain of the story. The cruel old man who stranded two vulnerable people in a blizzard that never happened. I set my coffee down and read it again, then a third time, slower. The byline was Linda Harper, lifestyle editor. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the move. Richard had leaned on his banking network, called in favors, and made sure this story landed exactly where it would hurt me the most. It was clever. I had to admit that. For the first time since this all began, I felt a sliver of respect. They weren't just spoiled parasites throwing tantrums. They were calculated, strategic. They knew reputation was currency in a city like Sacramento. One article in the right section of the paper could undo decades of work. This wasn't petty family drama anymore. This was open war. I folded the paper neatly and set it aside. My mind shifted into the same mode that had built my business from nothing. Deliberate, methodical, focused. This was no longer about Christmas dinners or unpaid mortgages. This was about survival and victory. I opened my laptop. Richard Morgan, Eleanor Morgan, Claudia Morales. One by one, I typed their names into search engines, pulling up their profiles, their photos, their digital footprints, connections, habits, weaknesses. Every careless detail they had ever left online now became ammunition. If they wanted to play chess, I would show them what a real player looked like. I glanced at the wall calendar. December 18th, 7 days until Christmas. 7 days to design a lesson they would never forget. For the next 3 days, I lived in a different state of mind. Not as Victor Morales, the washed-up man my family had dismissed, but as Victor Morales, the businessman, the strategist, the survivor who had clawed his way up once and could do it again. The laptop became my war room, browser tabs spread wide like cards in a high-stakes game. Richard Morgan, Eleanor Morgan, Claudia Morales, and soon, every secret they had left lying in the open would be mine. Richard Morgan, retired manager of Pacific Trust Bank, treasurer of the Pacific Coast Entrepreneurs Network, longtime member of the Evergreen Country Club, a man who had built his identity on trust and influence, a man with a reputation to protect and plenty to lose. Eleanor's Instagram told its own polished story. Charity luncheons, curated wine tastings, glossy vacation photos along Lake Tahoe tagged with blessed life. Every picture staged to radiate refinement, every caption engineered to draw compliments. Friends lined up in the comments praising her impeccable taste, her inspirational lifestyle, all of it funded by other people's wallets, including mine. Claudia's Facebook was even more revealing. Photos captioned our beautiful home with the kitchen I had paid for in the background. Check-ins at overpriced restaurants during the very months when I was covering their utility bills. One status update from just last week caught my eye. So excited for Christmas dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills. Our home. Our success. The narcissism was staggering, but it was Daniel's LinkedIn that tied the bow. His recent activity showed a brand new connection. Linda Harper, lifestyle editor at the San Francisco Chronicle. The same Linda Harper who had written the hit piece dragging my name through the dirt. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the tabs open across my screen. They'd made 3 fatal mistakes. First, they had underestimated me, completely. Second, they had gone public with their attack, which gave me full permission to go public with my answer. Third, they had chronicled their entire privileged existence online, handing me a perfect archive of their hypocrisy. I clicked on Linda Harper's profile, 44 years old, journalism degree from Stanford University, 16 years at small local papers, no banking background, no ties to finance, which meant Richard had sought her out, likely through one of his old business contacts. A quick search through Sacramento's business directories confirmed it, 4 mutual connections between Richard Morgan and Linda's editor. The smear piece hadn't landed by chance. It had been placed deliberately, carefully, but it was still amateur work. I opened a blank document, not to write a rebuttal to their lies. Something better. A weapon. I began building a timeline, 5 years of proof, bank statements, receipts, canceled checks, the down payment for their house, $50,000 pulled from my home equity loan. The kitchen renovation when Claudia demanded granite counters, $20,000 straight on my credit card, 60 consecutive mortgage payments, $2,800 apiece, $180,000, 250,000 and counting. And I had every shred of it in writing. In the last 10 years, I had given away more of myself than I ever thought possible. So when my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number, almost certainly Claudia trying another trick, I ignored it and kept working. By nightfall, I had a manila folder so thick it could choke a horse. Inside were bank statements, receipts, and photographs pulled straight from their own social media. Every shiny purchase they had paraded online, all paid for with my money. Tucked in the stack was a printed copy of the newspaper article, my red pen scribbles in the margins calling out every lie, every half-truth, every omission. On the wall calendar, December 24th was circled, not because of Christmas, but because it was the perfect date for justice. According to Claudia's Facebook events, they were hosting Christmas dinner for 12. Friends, neighbors, people from their social circle. The very kind of audience who believed every word of the San Francisco Chronicle. They would hear the truth tonight. I shut the laptop and reached for my old camera, the one I'd once used to document construction projects for my business. Tomorrow, it would serve another purpose, recording evidence of a different kind. Christmas Eve morning came gray and bitter, a typical Sacramento winter day. Too bad I wasn't welcome at any family table. But I had plans of my own. I laid out my evidence as if I were a prosecutor preparing for trial. Bank statements sorted by year, mortgage payments highlighted in yellow, receipts stacked in order showing how my money had fed their lifestyle. Printed photos of Claudia's jewelry, their vacations, even the Christmas decorations now hanging in the very house I'd kept afloat. I made 14 identical packets, one for every guest. The newspaper article went on top, my red notes visible. Lie next to Richard's dramatic storm story, false beside the claim of my erratic behavior, missing context written where they had conveniently erased 5 years of my financial support. Then I dressed for the occasion. My best navy suit, the one I had worn to Sophia's funeral. Tonight, it wasn't a funeral for her, it was a farewell to the man I had been, the man who had let himself be walked over. Tonight, I was someone different, someone who demanded respect. At 6:45, I slid the packets into my briefcase and drove to Brookside Heights. Their house glowed like a postcard, cars jammed into the driveway and along the street. Through the windows, I could see the silhouettes of people at the dining table. Claudia was laughing, performing the role of perfect hostess in the home my money had built. I parked across the street, checked my watch. 7 o'clock. Exactly right. Dinner underway. Main course served. No convenient escape. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Claudia always boasted about how safe their neighborhood was. Unlike the places where I had grown up, I stepped inside. Warmth hit my face, along with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. "But darling, that isn't how our family does things." Eleanor's voice floated from the dining room, followed by a round of laughter. "Our family." The same family they had worked so hard to keep me out of. I walked in with my briefcase in hand. 12 heads turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Claudia's glass stopped halfway to her lips. Daniel went pale. Richard and Eleanor looked as though they had seen a ghost. "Good evening," I said calmly, setting my case on the marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind if I join you for Christmas." Claudia snapped out of her shock first. "Victor, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave. Now." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out the first stack, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this celebration, this house, this dinner, this lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize, one of Eleanor's charity friends, probably, leaned forward. "What does he mean, Claudia?" "He's having some kind of episode," Claudia said quickly. "Daniel, call someone." But I was already moving around the table, placing packets in front of each person. "Here are the bank records," I said conversationally, like I was discussing the weather. 5 years of support, $168,000 in mortgage payments alone, plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The room fell into stunned silence, broken only by the sound of papers rustling. 12 pairs of eyes scanned the documents. Their faces shifted, surprise melting into disbelief, then into something else entirely. "This is," one man began, then stopped, staring at the highlighted numbers. "Outrageous," a woman across from him finished. "Claudia, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Her perfect hostess mask was cracking. It's more complicated than it looks. Victor offered to help us. We never asked. Actually, I cut in, sliding the newspaper article onto the table. Let's talk about what you did ask for, and what you told the media about me. The room seemed to chill. I handed out copies of the article, watching dinner guests recognize the unflattering photo of me that had been splashed across page 4 just days before. Now, I said, my voice steady and deliberate, let's discuss the real manipulators in this family. Richard's complexion drained from red to pale gray. Eleanor sat stiff, her wine glass hanging forgotten in her hand. Mr. Jenkins here, I continued, tapping the article, used his old banking connections to plant this story. Notice how I'm cast as unstable and dangerous, a cruel old man who abandoned helpless seniors in freezing weather. A gray-haired man in a tailored sweater glanced up from the print. Richard, what's going on here? The weather that day was 55 degrees and sunny, I answered before Richard could open his mouth. And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Claudia's parents, headed to a Christmas dinner I was forbidden to attend because I wasn't good enough. Eleanor stammered, we never said. You never said what, Eleanor? I held up my phone, scrolling through screenshots of Claudia's posts. That my food was too low class for your parents? That my Mexican cooking and blue-collar conversation would embarrass you in front of your educated friends? One of Eleanor's charity companions shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor, surely you didn't. He's twisting things, Richard blurted, but his voice wavered. This man is unstable. He's under stress, financial problems. Financial problems? I nearly laughed. I've been handing your daughter and son-in-law nearly $3,000 every month for 5 years. The only financial problems in this room are the ones you're about to face. I turned to the entire table. These people have bled me for over $250,000, while insulting me, while poisoning my own son against me. And when I finally said no, they tried to smear me in the paper. Daniel finally spoke, his voice thin. Dad, I didn't know about the newspaper. Your wife knew, I said evenly. Her parents set it up. They made me into a villain because I refused to be their chauffeur and their bank. I could see the mood shifting, like tectonic plates grinding under the surface. Faces around the table hardened as the truth settled in. This is disgraceful, said an elderly woman in pearls, staring down at the highlighted bank statements. Richard, how could you let your daughter exploit this man's kindness, then drag his name through the mud when he stopped? Richard tried to regain control. You don't understand the whole picture. I understand perfectly, she snapped. He supported your family while you treated him like a servant. And when he stopped, you tried to destroy him. Eleanor's voice broke. He abandoned us at the airport. After you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner, I said calmly, after 5 years of paying your bills while you sneered at my background and my education. Silence fell heavy as stone. 12 pairs of eyes fixed on Richard and Eleanor, filled with disgust, pity, and shame. Claudia tried one last gambit. Everyone, please. This is a private family matter. No, my voice cut clean. This stopped being private when you dragged me through the newspaper. When you decided my reputation was acceptable collateral for your arrogance. I wanted every person here to know the truth before they read about me again, because they will read about me again. But next time, it'll be the real story. I closed my briefcase and straightened my tie. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll ever pay for. I walked toward the door as the room behind me erupted, voices rising, questions firing, their perfect facade collapsing under its own weight. To me, it was the sweetest Christmas music I'd ever heard. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, sent by certified mail. I signed for it on my porch, spring air carrying the scent of new beginnings instead of the cold desperation of December. Notice of default. Inside the numbers told the story. 3 months of unpaid mortgage payments had caught up with Daniel and Claudia. $9,000 past due. 14 days to make it right, or face foreclosure on the house I had helped them buy. I set the letter aside and sipped my coffee, reading it the way you'd read about a storm on the other side of the country. Interesting, but not my problem anymore. The phone had been buzzing for weeks with desperate calls. Claudia's number was blocked after her first shrieking voicemail. Richard and Eleanor, whose social standing in Sacramento had evaporated like mist after the Christmas dinner fiasco, and Daniel, my son. I had ignored his calls too, half out of anger, half to see how long it would take him to choke down his pride. The answer was 100 days. It was Thursday evening when I heard the knock. Daniel stood on my porch, not the polished man who had once told me I wasn't welcome at his Christmas table, but someone worn down, years older than he should have looked. Dark circles hollowed his eyes. His tailored suit was rumpled, his skin gray with exhaustion. Desperation clung to him like cheap cologne. "Dad," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around my home as if he were seeing it for the first time. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck, the freshly painted walls I'd ignored for 8 years, the small repairs I'd finally managed to make once I stopped paying for his lifestyle. "Nice place," he muttered. "That's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it," I said, settling into my recliner. "Coffee?" He shook his head and perched on the edge of my couch like a guest who wasn't sure he belonged. "Dad," he began, voice heavy, "I need you to know how sorry I am for Christmas, for the article, for the way Claudia and I treated you. Go on." I didn't know Richard planted that story, I swear. He dragged his hands through his hair. "When I found out, Jesus, Dad, the things they said about you, the way they talked about our family, about Mom, my jaw clenched, but I kept my voice even. And what did they say about your mother?" His shoulders sagged. "That she knew her place better than you, that she understood boundaries." He couldn't look at me. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply, "you should have." Silence stretched. Outside, I heard a neighbor mowing the lawn, the sound of an ordinary evening in an ordinary neighborhood, the kind of life where sons didn't exile their fathers from holidays. "The house is in foreclosure," Daniel admitted finally. "I know. We can't make the payments without—" He stopped himself. "Without my help," I finished for him. "Without the money I bled into that house while your wife's family treated me like dirt." He swallowed. "I know how it looks. Daniel." I leaned forward until he met my eyes. "Do you know how much I gave you over 5 years?" He nodded miserably. "Claudia added it up after Christmas. The mortgage, the down payment, everything. Over $200,000. $250,000, I corrected. I know the exact number, because I finally forced myself to do what I should have done years ago. Add it up." His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it," I said. "That money's gone. But worse than that, the years are gone. Years we could have spent building a relationship. Instead, I was underwriting your wife's fantasy." "I know," he whispered. Then, after a long pause, "But maybe we could start over, find a way back." "Are you asking me to resume the mortgage payments?" The hope drained from his face. "We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Claudia's respect, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do." "You'll figure it out," I said, not cruelly, just honest. The way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you laughed with people who thought I was beneath them. Tears welled in his eyes. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet tears, like a man who had run out of choices. "I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever." I studied him for a long moment. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed for, who had let his wife's family convince him that his father wasn't worthy of his own blood. "No, Daniel," I said at last. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference." He wiped at his face. "Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me?" "I forgave you months ago," I said, and I meant it. "But forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. It isn't resuming the payments. It isn't going back to scraps of attention at someone else's table." "Then what does it mean?" I stood and walked to the mantel. Sophia's photo smiled back at me, and beside it, a new picture, me at Easter with Rosa and her family, the first holiday I'd spent with people who truly wanted me there. "It means if you want a relationship with me, you start from the ground up. It means showing me respect, not demanding I earn it. It means making choices because they're right, not because they're easy. And it means the next time your wife or anyone tries to push me out of family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family." He nodded slowly, something shifting in his eyes. Maybe for the first time, he understood that respect isn't inherited, it's chosen. The house, he asked quietly, isn't my problem anymore. I sat back down in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. You're a grown man, Daniel. Time to start acting like one. Find work that actually pays your bills. Sell the house if you have to. Buy something you can afford. Stop expecting other people to bankroll your mistakes. He stood slowly, shoulders straighter than when he had come in. For the first time all night, he looked less like a boy begging for rescue and more like a man facing his own consequences. You're right, he said quietly. About all of it. I know. At the door, he paused. Dad, for what it's worth, when you stood up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was proud. Embarrassed and furious, sure, but proud too. Good, I replied. Maybe there's still some hope for you. After he left, I poured a glass of good whiskey and stepped onto the back porch. Spring was stirring in Sacramento, buds on the trees, air warming with new promise. In 5 months, I would turn 64. Sophia had been gone 8 years. I'd wasted 5 of those years breaking myself in half for people who mistook sacrifice for servitude. Not anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from Rosa, dinner Sunday? The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled as I typed back, wouldn't miss it. Real family, I had learned, isn't bound by blood or last names. It's the people who want you at their table, not the ones who tolerate you while spending your money. Everything else, those dinners, that house, their social standing, had been nothing but expensive theater. And I was done buying tickets to plays where I wasn't welcome on stage. The whiskey burned warm on my tongue. It tasted like freedom. And the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. If you enjoyed this story, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. And when you're ready for the next story, just click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.